Hey, what's up? Back when saying, yo, I want to deal with this subject because I'm confused. Really am. I am confused. So it's like, are black people anti-Semitic? And if so, why is it a problem? I don't. That's what I don't understand. Because there's a lot been going on. Especially what happened with Nick Cannon, and I was completely not surprised, but disappointed that this band was going to apologize. And then he donated money to the Jewish Center. I mean, damn. I was completely disappointed. So it's like, the question that I'm asking is like, why is it when somebody says, when another black person says to another black person that you're anti-Semitic, that's a problem or it's a bad thing? Because if another black person said to me, man, you're anti-Semitic, I'm like, and? And? It's like, if another black person said to me, man, you're anti-racist. And? I mean, I'm supposed to be anti-racist, right? We supposed to be anti-racist, just like we supposed to be anti-Semitic. But if you don't know history, you don't know the past, you would think being anti-Semitic is a bad thing. Jewish people got our people believing that being anti-Semitic is a bad thing, but it's not. When Jews have exploited, profited off of black people for the past 600 years. So this is why I don't understand why us being anti-Semitic is a problem. It's only a problem for those who are ignorant of history. We all know about the past in the 60s. You hear about the stories in the 60s, the 50s, in the 70s, how Jews exploited all the black musicians because they were what? The owners of the record labels. So I don't understand why it's a problem. You look at the early 1900s, where who owned those movie studios? Warner Brothers, Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer. Those are Jewish people. And what did they do with all the minstrel shows? They portrayed blackface, white people in blackface. But we're not supposed to be upset at that. Those were Jews who did that. When we going around here now getting mad at Aunt Jemima and having the pancake company has to change its name, change the brand. That started because of Jews. I know it's owned by Quakers, but it was Jews who also promoted that in the early 1900s. All that blackface stuff, a lot of Jews who came over from Poland, from out of Europe, all those Jewish actors put on blackface. And they promoted that stereotype, how black people are lazy and dumb and ignorant. But we're not supposed to be mad at that. It was Jews who did that. They're the ones who was in control of the movie industry. The film industry in the early 1900s. So why is it we're not supposed to be upset at what that stereotype that they perpetuated and pushed onto America about our ancestors? They did that. So I don't understand. This is why I'm confused at why you're not mad at that. And we're not supposed to get upset at that. This was before the Holocaust. So they had the idea that black people are lazy. They was promoting those ideas that black people are ignorant, not smart. This is what they've been doing. And for me, I mean, on a personal level, I remember as a teenager, I didn't understand why. I remember I went to Galileo High School, San Francisco, 10th grade. Miss Christensen was my teacher. And we had to go see Schindler's List. And I was so confused of why I had to go see that movie. You know, they took us as a field trip, you know, took the whole class to go see Schindler's List. And I was like, what the fuck? What does this got to do with me? You know, why do I got to care about white people killing white people? You know, and then everybody jumped on me. Oh, you're not supposed to look at it like that. And again, they'll say I was what, like 16. But I was confused, and I was like, why are y'all forcing us to go see this dumbass movie? It was boring, dumb. I didn't want to see that shit. And that's the thing, is that they forced their history and their beliefs onto us, and for us to accept it. You know, they don't forget their past, but we supposed to forget our past. And for the average black person, you could put 5 Jews in a line with another 5 just regular white people. We ain't gonna tell them we don't know the difference, because to us they're just regular white people, and that's what they are. The only difference between Jews and the other white people is that Jews use their religion as their ethnicity. That's the difference. Besides that, they just some regular white people. That's what you have to, and that's what we have to understand. We had a Holocaust, the Ma'afa, that our ancestors suffered and went through. The Jews had their Holocaust that they was suffered and they went through. And it was horrible. But the only difference is we didn't participate in the Jewish Holocaust, but they participated in ours. And we're not supposed to be mad at that. Come on, that makes no sense whatsoever. I say to people all the time, black people, we have a right to be anti-Semitic, just like we have a right to be anti-racist. And yes, the Semitic language, you know, is more than those people who want to consider themselves Jewish. You know, the Arabs are also Semitic. And yeah, we mad at Arabs too. They enslaved African people for 1,000 years before the Europeans did it. So what? We not supposed to, what? We ain't supposed to think about that either? That's a different, I know that's a different, you know what I'm saying, different subject, but yeah. So we have a right to be anti-Semitic. Jewish people profited and participated in the Ma'afa, in the African slave trade. We know they did. They did it at the beginning of it. Not at the end, at the very beginning of it. All right, so you got to stop with this. You know, you're anti-Semitic. You're not supposed to hate or dislike Jews. That's bad. We hate on every other white person, no matter if they're Christian, Protestants, Catholics. We hate on them for the things that they've done in the past. Why are we stopping when it comes to Jews? That makes no sense whatsoever. No sense. But let's deal with the facts. I mean, matter of fact, I don't even got to deal with the facts. I can just present it to you. You don't have to hear it from me. You have Jewish scholars themselves doing the research and talking about slavery, Jewish slave owners, Jewish slave traders. All right? You have this guy, which is Professor Stan Mervis. His book that just came out on Jew slave traders and slavers in Jamaica. Many prominent Jewish families down in the Caribbean islands had African slaves and did what? Rape a lot of the African women, have children by them, and they left it in their will that their children could have a part of their fortune only if they became Jewish. You know, the children of the African sisters that they raped. You know, that's his interview. You can listen to his own words himself as he talked about the situation.
So that all made me realize that we need to address the issue of Jewish slave ownership. over time I've also realized that this has been the subject of competing tendencies. One coming from a anti-Jewish position like the Nation of Islam that wanted to make the case that Jews were overly represented in the slave trade and were overly abusive to slaves, and that's not true. In fact, it's kind of puzzling why Jews weren't more involved in the slave trade, since it was a totally open, open type of endeavor that had no guilds or protections like that. And Jews owned slaves to the same extent that everybody else did, so there were no particularities. Now, this stands in contrast to a rival kind of mentality where Jews must have treated their slaves better. Because how could you be sitting at a Passover Seder saying we were once slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt while being served by slaves? But people did that. And so some scholars reached an apologetic conclusion in the 20th century saying that Jews manumitted their slaves more readily or treated them better. And I find that no position is really captures the truth. So in fact, I crunched the numbers in my wills and I found that slaves were about 11 times more likely to be bequeathed than they were to be freed by Jews. So it's very uncommon to actually free manumit slaves. And there are cases of Jewish abuse of slaves. And then there are, especially focused on Suriname, where Jews had a whole plantation community of their own, autonomous Jewish plantation village called Yoden Savannah, where they enslaved thousands of Africans. So there's been a lot of new research, and I think where we are writ large is that the Jews show no particularity in their slave ownership than anybody else. And that's true in the American South as well. And there were, proportionally to the numbers, because there were more Jews living in the North at the time of the Civil War, but proportionately there was as much support for the Southern cause among Jews as there were for as there was for the cause of the North. And ironically, the rabbinate was quite split on the issue of emancipation of slaves. And you know, so in one case, Morris Rafal in New York wrote a very famous piece, an editorial, where he defended slavery because, after all, the Bible endorses slavery, and the Bible actually sets out very clear parameters by which a Jew should own slaves, or how a Jew should own slaves. That was opposed by, he was more of the Orthodox, you may call, spectrum, or a supporter of like Isaac Leeser type of Judaism in America, whereas the Reform took a more progressive policy towards that. And so people like, I think his name was Bernard Felsenthal in Chicago, and famously David Einhorn, a Reform rabbi, who was a student, if I'm not mistaken, a student of Kaufman Kohler, or or I may have it, actually I think I have it the other way around. Right, an important foundational figure in Reform Judaism in America. He was in Baltimore, and he avidly championed the cause of abolition. He was actually run out of his own home in Baltimore for doing that, because it was a slave supporting.
So all of the Reform progressive abolitionists would have been in the North or relatively close. We wouldn't be finding them in the South, right?
Well, theoretically, in the South there were positions. So let's say the furthest south maybe have been Cincinnati, where someone like Isaac Mayer Wise, you know, a towering figure in American Jewry, took a kind of middle position where he wasn't willing to say that slavery was antithetical to Judaism, but found some shared cause. One thing that nobody was an abolitionist.
Oh, really?
And that is.
We know that a lot of Jewish people participate in the slave trade. When the Jews, they were kicked out of every country that they were in. I mean, that should be a problem. We should know that's a problem. But we know they was kicked out of Spain. All right, in the beginning, in 1492. In fact, Bishop de Acosta talked about it. He wrote it in his journal. And Columbus, he wrote in his journal. The day he was setting the voyage to sail, he talked about, he mentioned how the Jews were being rounded up and being kicked out of Spain at that time. We know that they was kicked out of France. They was kicked out of Portugal and Britain, Germany, Croatia. All them countries they was kicked out of. But here's the thing: when they was kicked out of Spain at that time, some of the families went up to the Netherlands, went up to Dutchland, and not Dutchland, Denmark and Switzerland. That's where they went, and they restarted, their family and all that stuff, and started businesses. And what happened, if you read the history of Denmark, you would know that a lot of the slave docks, the slave ships that were built, they were built by Jewish family members. And Jews had an investment in the slave trade. They invested it in the ships being built. They put money in it, whether they put, 5%, 10% of the stock into the ship, into the business of building the slave ship. They invested it in it. They invested it in capturing African people and bringing them into slavery to the Americas. It was documented. We have the ship's names, the ones that they used, like Abigail and Crown and Nassau and the Four Ladies, and all these ships were owned by people like Moses Levi, William Daywolf, with Shalom Smiths and all these stuff. These were Jewish people. And this is history that's been written and documented about. And another book, the book that I've mentioned before, if you saw my other videos, is European slave trade in the Indian Ocean. So all the Dutch colonies was majority Jewish people who were invested in the slave trade. All the Dutch colonies, those were Jews who invested in those slave ships and who was enslavers. Y'all didn't know that, did y'all? Like I said, a lot of Jewish families went up to Denmark, and that was in the 1500s. And so 100 years later, in the 1600s, when Denmark got into the slave trade, a lot of Jewish people financed the slave ships. And they got into building slave ships. And there's another book, with the pirates. What's it called? Pirates, Merchants, and Sailors, and it talks about the East Dutch Indian Company bringing slaves from Africa, from the east coast of Africa, to the Americas, to New York and Rhode Island. To what families? To Jewish families. People who invested and made investments in the voyage to get slaves. Those were Jews. When you hear about the Native Americans, when the Europeans came, the ones that they captured, after they slaughtered the rest of the villages, they captured some of them and they sent them down to the Caribbean. Those who ran that operation were Jews. Who ran the ship, the runs from the north to the Caribbean, were Jews. The majority of the people in the Caribbean that held the ports and that maintained the ports, the docking ports for the slave ship, were Jewish owners of the slave docks. So this is why I don't understand why there's such a hatred when black people, or what is a disdain, or trying to shame us for being anti-Semitic, for hating on Jews. Like they have, what I've never seen, what I haven't read about? I've never read any Jewish army fighting the Dutch, fighting the French, fighting the Spanish, fighting the British to free black people from slavery. I didn't read about that at all. And just heard how Professor Stan Miller said that you had Jewish people fighting in the Confederacy to maintain slavery. But yet, we're not supposed to hate on them. Come on, man. Y'all gotta stop the ignorance and stop falling for the okie dokes. You know what I'm saying? Falling for that bullshit. They can't, we apologize. Didn't mean. Fuck that. The Jews deserve every bit of hate they get. If you hate on any other white person for the shit they did, why are you stopping at them? That makes no sense. They don't deserve a pass for all the stuff that they've done to us for past 600 years. They don't deserve a pass at all. So stop it, man. I had to make this video. I wanted, because I was being irritated. It was being irritated. A lot of people going back and forth. People on Twitter, Instagram about the Jews, and it's like, y'all, how do y'all not know about their involvement in the slave trade? They had a huge involvement. So we know from Carter G. Woodson, thanks to the brother Carter G. Woodson and the work that he did in his book that he came out with. Oh man, what was the name of that book? Free Negroes, slaves in America. Free Negro owners of slaves. His book. He's the one who started the research. Who got this research started? Because this is what I'm talking about. When you don't read history, you guys don't read and don't study history. You're the ones who are looking like fools. And you allow people to pull the wool over your eyes. It was Carter G. Woodson in his book. He noticed that a lot of black freed slaves or former slaves had Jewish names, surnames, and he was like, "Wait a minute, why y'all got Jewish surnames? Unless they were slaves of Jewish people." And that's what got that research started by the Nation of Islam. Mr. Louis Farrakhan, I believe they did that research and went into it. But as we saw, we've been doing the research. We've talked about it. Our people have been talking about it for years. And now, as you just saw, the Jewish scholars, they're coming out with research on their own and admitting to it. But they trying to downplay it. You saw he trying to downplay it. Oh, they was nice slaves. They weren't. They weren't nice slaves at all. So we know this. We know who they are. We know who they were. We know who these Jewish slave owners were, slave traders, who they were in history. Alexander Lindo, Abigail Menes. There were a lot of Jews down in the South in Savannah, Georgia, that left out of Savannah in the 1700s, in the mid 1700s, in about 1740, 1750 or something like that, around 1740, because of the restrictions, the laws that was passed on slavery. So they left. Because there was restrictions put on slavery, on how to treat slaves. So they left. They went to other states so they could maintain the mistreatment of our people. Because they love raping black women. White men love raping black women. And y'all trying to treat the Jewish people as if they're not white, which is complete fallacy. So that's how a lot of the kids or the slaves got their Jewish name, because they was children of rape. Levi Jacobs from New Orleans, another big slave trader, slave owner. Benjamin Mordecai, one of the biggest ones in Charleston, South Carolina, Jewish slave plantation owner. Sold slaves, traded in slaves by the hundreds. So, the ignorance, man, this is the ignorance that we have to break ourselves of. Study history and know this stuff. Samuel Mass. These people own slaves, man. Maurice Bennett. Everybody, it's not everybody, but their names are like in history. When you read the documents, they have their names. They put up flyers for runaway slaves. You know, Jewish people also put up flyers. We see the old flyers with their names on them. Like Abigail Minnis, she posted flyers in like the 1700s about slaves who ran away in Georgia. So we not supposed to be anti-Semitic, even though they mistreated us for the past 600 years, or 500 years. Let's say 500 years. Profited off us, made money, exploited black people, but we are not supposed to be anti-Semitic against them. They're white people just like any other white people. All they do is use their religion as their identity. You have to wake up. You have to know who you're dealing with. And that's the problem, because we don't know who our enemies are. As we saw in the Civil Rights Movement, it was the Jewish people who derailed the Civil Rights Movement. Civil Rights Movement that we was going for was about, we was fighting for justice, not for integrationists, not to be integrationalists. We had our own community, our own schools, our own banks, our own grocery store. You don't even have not one black-owned grocery store in a black neighborhood. All these cities around here. Black farmers are struggling to maintain, you know what I'm saying, their farms because these white businesses, these white grocery stores are not buying from them. It was the Jews. It was those people in the early 1950s. 1909, they started what? The NAACP. These Stephen Wise and Emanuel Hirsch, along with, yes, W.E.B. Du Bois, was misguided into believing that they was there to help our cause. But integrating with white America didn't help black people. It hurted us. And we see the evidence of that. We don't own shit in the black neighborhood. All the stores in our neighborhood, you see 90%, you may have one or two black, you know, mom and pop stores, you know, a clothing store here or there. All the liquor stores owned by Koreans, Indians. The grocery stores owned by white corporations or Koreans. You know, the corner stores, Koreans, Chinese. Dry cleaners, Koreans, Chinese. Gas stations, white corporations, Indians, Arabs, everybody except for our own people. Because we're not thinking about doing for ourselves and supporting ourselves. When everybody else does it, the Jews have no problem with shopping at Jewish-only stores, supporting Jews. The Koreans have no problem shopping at Korean-only stores. I remember when we did have black bookstores, when they were around, I ain't never seen a Chinese person in a black bookstore. You could go to black restaurants in your neighborhood. I don't never see Chinese people walking in there. I don't see Jewish people coming into black restaurants. But yet we want to support them because we don't understand who our enemies are. It was the Jews who, like I said, derailed the civil rights movement and got us fighting for integration, which destroyed black neighborhoods. And that's not an opinion, man. That's facts. We had our own schools. We had our own everything. How many black-owned banks do you guys know of? I mean, I'm Washington, D.C. I only know of one black-owned bank in Washington, D.C. I think they make this maybe two. But right now, all I knew is one. We had our own stuff. But we're not supposed to be anti-Semitic. Even though they pulled the rope-a-dope, pulled the wool over our eyes, and made us believe, you know, that our salvation was aligned in integration with white people. That's our salvation. Nah, man. Nah. No, we have a right to be anti-Semitic. For the centuries of mistreatment by the Jewish people. Jewish white people just like any other white person. Don't matter. We are mistreated by all white people. Don't matter if they call themselves Catholics or Jewish or Protestants, Christians. We were mistreated by all of them. So we have a right to be anti-Semitic. So I just don't understand that. We gotta stop. We gotta stop ignorance and educate ourselves on the history. There's too much evidence that the Jews were involved in the slave trade. Too much. So I'm gonna end it there. I'm not gonna carry on, but that's what I wanted to say. Black people, Black Americans, African Americans are descendants of African. Those who were born here in America, in the Caribbean. We have the right to be anti-Semitic. Jewish people exploited our people, raped our mothers and daughters, cousins and sisters, profited off our death, misery, used our bodies as their property, as cattle, for their benefit. These are historic facts. There's no need to debate about it. I'm not debating slavery with white people. That's dumb. We're not debating that. That's dumb. Stop doing that. I'm not apologizing to the Jews. They need to apologize to us. The hell with them. I get heated. I'm out, man. I'm out.